First story. I believe my sister and cheated on my husband, betraying my kids. Now I'm regretting everything. My husband is leaving me, the kids hate me, and my sister is of no help. Plus husband's response. I messed up so badly, and I don't even know if there's any way to fix it. I'm 34, married to my husband Jake 36 for 10 years. We have 2 kids, our daughter is 7 and our son is 5. On paper my life should be great. Jake has a stable job in IT, and I've been able to stay home with the kids, which is what I thought I wanted. But somewhere along the way I started feeling, I don't know, invisible. Trapped. I didn't even realize how unhappy I was until my sister started putting ideas in my head. My older sister, Laura 39, has always been the more opinionated one in the family. She's the type who gets in debates with strangers on Facebook over feminism and politics, and thinks she's always right. She divorced her husband about 2 years ago, and ever since she's been on this, I've found myself kick. She's all about women being independent, marriage being outdated, and how I've lost my identity by being a stay-at-home mom. At first I laughed it off because honestly she's always been a bit over the top. But she kept pushing. Every time we talked, she'd throw in little comments like, "Don't you ever feel like there's more out there for you?" Or, "You're too smart to just be washing dishes and wiping noses all day." I guess I started letting it get to me. Jake is a good guy, he's steady, dependable and works hard, but he's not the most romantic or expressive. Our routine became so predictable. He'd work long hours, I'd handle everything at home, and by the time the kids were in bed, we'd just zone out in front of the TV. We weren't unhappy, but it felt like we were roommates more than anything. I started resenting him, and Laura was right there to fan the flames. She kept telling me how I was giving up my independence, and how I deserved to feel alive again. The tipping point came when I went to my college reunion a few months ago. Jake encouraged me to go, said it'd be nice for me to have a break. He stayed home with the kids, so I could have the weekend to myself. I hadn't seen most of those people in years, and honestly I felt excited just to get dressed up and not be mom for a couple of days. That's where I reconnected with Ryan. He was an old friend from college, the charming, flirty type who always had a way of making people feel like they were the center of attention. We ended up talking for hours, reminiscing about old times, laughing about dumb things we used to do. He made me feel interesting again, like there was still this version of me that wasn't just about carpool schedules and grocery lists. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I didn't mean for anything to happen, but we started texting. At first, it was innocent, just catching up, sharing funny stories, but then the messages started getting more personal. He'd say things like, "I can't believe someone like you feels stuck," or "If I were your husband, I'd never take you for granted." It felt so good to be noticed like that. I told Laura about Ryan, expecting her to tell me I was out of line. Instead, she told me to explore it. She said I deserved to feel wanted and alive, and that it wasn't wrong to put myself first for once. I knew deep down it was crossing a line, but I let myself believe her. I told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong because it was just texting. Until it wasn't. A few weeks later, I met up with Ryan. I told myself it was just to talk, to clear the air, but one thing led to another and we slept together. I can't even describe the mix of emotions I felt after. Part of me felt like I'd taken back control of my life, like I was reclaiming something I'd lost. But that feeling didn't last long. By the time I got home, I was consumed by guilt. I couldn't look Jake in the eye. I couldn't even tuck my kids in without feeling like a complete fraud. The worst part is, I confided in Laura again, thinking she'd help me figure out how to fix this mess. Instead, she brushed it off like it was no big deal. She told me I was overthinking it. That Jake would get over it if he found out. And that this was about me reclaiming my independence. Her advice made me feel even more conflicted, because, deep down, I knew I'd made a huge mistake. Jake found out a week later. He overheard me on the phone with Laura late at night, crying and telling her how much I regretted everything. He didn't say a word at first, he just walked out of the room. The next morning he confronted me, and I'll never forget the look on his face. He didn't yell or throw things. He just looked broken and asked why. I didn't have a good answer. How could I? I tried to explain how I'd felt invisible, how Laura had convinced me I was missing out on life. But it all sounded so hollow. He told me he needed space and has barely spoken to me since. He's sleeping in the guest room, and I can't even begin to explain how tense the house feels. The kids know something's wrong, and I hate that they're being dragged into this. I've cut off Ryan completely, but Jake doesn't believe me. Honestly, I don't blame him. He says he can't trust me anymore, and I don't even know how to begin fixing this. Laura is still in my ear, telling me I did nothing wrong, but I can't stand to hear it anymore. I don't even know who I am right now. Is there any way to fix this? Or have I destroyed my marriage and my family for good? Edit: the first few days after Jake found out were pure hell. He moved into the guest room that night, and I've been walking on eggshells ever since. He barely speaks to me unless it's about the kids or something practical like bills or groceries. Even then, his tone is clipped, like he's forcing himself to acknowledge me. I don't blame him. I destroyed his trust, but living in this limbo is unbearable. I thought I could handle the silence, but the guilt eats me alive every time I see him. He's been trying to hold it together for the kids, but they know something's up. Our daughter Lily asked me yesterday if Daddy was mad at me. What was I supposed to say? I just told her Daddy was tired from work, but I could tell she didn't believe me. The tension is so thick it's suffocating. I tried talking to him a couple of times, but every attempt ended with him shutting me down. The first time I sat down across from him at the kitchen table and said, "Jake, can we talk?" He just stared at me for a moment, like he didn't even recognize me, before shaking his head and saying, "Not now." Another time I tried to really apologize, and he just looked at me and said, "You don't even understand what you've done, do you?" Then he walked away. He's right. I didn't fully understand, but I'm starting to now. I've hurt him in a way I'm not sure I can ever fix. And then there's Laura. She has been absolutely no help. In fact, she's made things worse. When I told her Jake found out, her first reaction wasn't concern for me or my family, it was to defend what I'd done. She said something like, "Well, maybe this is a good thing. It's forcing you both to confront the cracks in your relationship." I couldn't believe it. It's like she doesn't even live in the real world. I told her this wasn't just some self-help experiment. This was my life falling apart. She rolled her eyes and said Jake was overreacting, that I didn't owe him some blind loyalty. I don't know why I kept listening to her for so long, but even now when I'm trying to take accountability, she keeps trying to twist things so I'll feel justified. I think part of me leaned on Laura so heavily because I didn't want to face the truth. It was easier to tell myself I was just rediscovering myself or taking back control than to admit I made a selfish, stupid choice. I wanted to believe I was some misunderstood, oppressed wife instead of what I actually am, a woman who betrayed her husband and destroyed her family. But the more I look at Laura now, the more I see how delusional she is. Her divorce wasn't some empowering act of liberation. It was a mess. Her ex left because she treated him like dirt and expected him to worship her while she gave nothing back. I hate that I let her project her bitterness onto my marriage. Jake made it clear he wants nothing to do with her. He hasn't said it outright, but I think it's a condition for even considering reconciliation. I haven't told her that yet because I know how she'll react. She'll call Jake controlling or accuse me of letting a man dictate my life. But the truth is, I don't even want to talk to her anymore. Every time I hear her voice, it reminds me of how I got here. The only person who's been remotely honest with me is my best friend Mia. She's known me and Jake since college, and she didn't hold back when I told her what happened. At first, she just stared at me like she was trying to process whether I was serious. Then she said, "What the hell were you thinking?" I told her everything about Laura, the affair, the guilt, and instead of coddling me, she laid it out straight. "You can't blame Laura for this. Yeah, she's toxic as hell, but you made the choice. You need to own that if you're ever going to fix this." Mia's right, of course. I was delusional to think I could pin this all on Laura. She may have pushed me, but I let her. I made the decision to text Ryan to meet him, to cross every boundary. That's on me. But now that I've realized it, I feel like it's too late. Jake has every right to hate me, and I don't even know where to start earning his forgiveness. Yesterday I tried again to talk to him. I told him I'd cut off Ryan, and that I'd do whatever it took to fix this. He just shook his head and said, "It's not about him. It's about you." How am I supposed to believe anything you say now? I don't have an answer for that. How do you prove to someone that you won't hurt them again when you've already shattered their trust? I feel like I'm drowning. Every time I try to swim to the surface, I just sink deeper. I'm thinking of suggesting therapy, but I'm terrified he'll laugh in my face. And honestly, I don't know if I even deserve a second chance. Maybe this is just the price I have to pay for being so blind and selfish. Husbands post hi, Reddit. Jake here. My wife showed me the posts she made on her account. She said she wanted me to see how sorry she is and how much she's struggling to deal with what happened. I read through her posts, and while I don't doubt that she regrets her choices, I feel like there's a lot she left out, either because she's not ready to face it, or because she doesn't want people to judge her too harshly. So, I'm here to clear the air, not to bash her, but to give you the full picture and explain why I've decided not to reconcile. First, I want to say this. I loved my wife. I married her because I believed she was someone I could trust with my whole heart. We had a good life, at least I thought we did. Sure, things weren't perfect, and I know I wasn't always as emotionally available as I could have been. But I was working long hours to give our family stability, and I thought we had an understanding. She wanted to stay home with the kids, and I did everything I could to make that possible. I thought we were partners. I thought she appreciated what we built together. I didn't know that while I was working 50-hour weeks to keep everything running, she was spending her free time talking to her sister about how unhappy she was. I didn't know her sister was encouraging her to look outside our marriage because she deserved to feel alive. And I definitely didn't know she was reconnecting with Ryan, a guy she dated briefly in college, behind my back. She says it started as innocent texting, but from the moment she started hiding it from me, it stopped being innocent. What she didn't tell you in her post is how deep this went. She admitted to me that they'd been talking for months, and the messages weren't just casual or friendly. She deleted most of them, but she let it slip that they'd been exchanging flirty messages long before anything physical happened. She kept saying I didn't think it would go that far, as if that makes it better. She had plenty of chances to stop, to shut it down, to tell me the truth, but she didn't. Instead, she let it escalate. I found out about the affair in the worst possible way. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't looking for trouble. I heard her crying on the phone with her sister late at night. She was saying things like, I ruined everything, and I don't know if Jake will ever forgive me. I froze. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to convince myself I was misunderstanding. But when I stepped into the room, she looked at me like a deer in headlights. That look told me everything I needed to know. The next morning, I asked her to tell me the truth. She admitted she'd slept with Ryan once and that she regretted it. But over the next few days, I started piecing together more of the story, things she hadn't told me. For example, she didn't tell me Ryan was her ex-boyfriend from college, until I asked who he was. She didn't tell me she'd been texting him for months before they met up. She didn't tell me that Laura had been pushing her to explore her feelings the whole time. I had to drag every detail out of her. And even now, I'm not sure I have the full story. One thing she didn't mention in her post is that she sent Ryan a message after I found out. She told me she'd cut him off completely, but I saw the text. Jake knows. I can't talk to you anymore. The fact that she felt the need to say goodbye to him after everything was the final nail in the coffin for me. She wasn't just sorry for what she did to me. She was sorry that her relationship with him was ending. That's a level of betrayal I can't move past. And then there's Laura. I've never liked her. I put up with her because she's my wife's sister. But now I see just how much of a toxic influence she's been. She spent years telling my wife she was settling for me. That she was wasting her potential as a stay-at-home mom. And that I didn't appreciate her. When my wife started feeling guilty about the affair, Laura told her she was being dramatic. And that I'd get over it. That woman actively encouraged my wife to destroy our marriage. I told my wife I want Laura out of our lives for good. But I'm not sure she's ready to let her go. Even now. After everything that's happened, I've made my decision. I'm not going to reconcile. Trust is the foundation of any relationship. And once it's broken, you can't just glue it back together. I'll never be able to look at her the same way again. Every time she's late coming home. Every time she picks up her phone. Every time she says she's going to meet a friend. I'll wonder if she's lying to me. That's no way to live. For either of us. I'm staying in the house for now, mostly for the kids. They don't deserve to have their lives upended more than they already have. But as soon as we can figure out a custody arrangement and financial logistics, I'll be moving out. I told her I'm willing to co-parent as amicably as possible. But our marriage is over. Some people might think I'm being too harsh. That I should give her another chance for the sake of our family. But this wasn't a mistake. It was a series of conscious decisions. She chose to text him. She chose to meet him. She chose to sleep with him. And then she chose to hide it. How am I supposed to rebuild a marriage when I can't even trust her to tell me the whole truth? I'm not writing this to make her look bad. She's not a bad person. She's the mother of my children, and I'll always care about her on some level. But she made her choices and I have to make mine. For me, for my sanity and for my own self-respect, I have to walk away. Second story. I humiliated my husband in front of my best friends, comparing him to my exes, and my husband overheard me, had a meltdown, lashed out and left me. Now send divorce papers. I think he is trying to cover his affairs. Hi Reddit. I'm really upset and confused right now and I could use some advice. My 33F husband 36M, and I have been married for 6 years. We've had ups and downs like any couple, but I thought we were in a good place. That's why his reaction last night completely blindsided me and left me heartbroken. Here's what happened. I invited a couple of my close friends over for a girls' night. We were in the living room, having some wine, chatting and venting, just the usual stuff. I'll admit the conversation did turn to our relationships, and I shared a few frustrations about my husband, Mike. I mentioned that he's amazing at providing for us financially, but in other areas like, say, being spontaneous or adventurous, he's not exactly a 10/10. I might have said that my ex from years ago was a bit more exciting in certain ways, but I immediately followed it up by saying I chose Mike, because he's stable, dependable and honestly a great partner in so many other ways. It wasn't meant to tear him down. It was just me trying to explain why I appreciate him, even if he's not perfect. We also touched on how his parents had suggested counseling back when we were going through a rough patch. I might have called them a little overbearing because they've always had strong opinions about our relationship. But it wasn't anything harsh. My friends laughed and I thought that was the end of it. But apparently Mike had come home early without me realizing, and he overheard the conversation. He walked into the room looking upset, and the first thing he said was, "This is what you think of me. This is what you tell people." He seemed genuinely hurt, which shocked me because I didn't think anything I said was that bad. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to insult him. It was just venting and joking around. But he didn't want to hear it. He went upstairs, started packing a bag, and told me he needed space to figure out what to do next. He said he felt humiliated and disrespected. I was stunned. It's not like I was bad-mouthing him to strangers. It was just my closest friends, and it wasn't anything they didn't already know. Now he's gone and he's not answering my calls or texts. His mom told me he's staying with them for now, and that he's really upset. I feel like he's blowing this out of proportion. I wasn't trying to hurt him. I was just sharing my feelings with people I trust. So Reddit. How do I get him to come back? I need him to see that this isn't worth throwing away a marriage over. Every couple has their issues. Right. How do I make him understand that I didn't mean any harm? Update. Hey everyone. I wasn't planning to post again. But things have escalated and I need advice more than ever. After my husband Mike walked out, I gave him some space for a couple of days, thinking he'd cool down and come home. I sent a few texts apologizing if he misunderstood what he heard and explaining that it wasn't a big deal. But he didn't respond. I thought maybe he just needed time to process everything. Well, today I got a text from one of our mutual friends, someone I wasn't even that close with. And she said Mike has been talking to a divorce lawyer. A divorce lawyer. I couldn't believe it. I'm completely blindsided. How do we go from a silly argument to him actually considering ending our marriage? It feels so extreme. And I can't shake the feeling that there must be something more going on. It doesn't add up. I've apologized, tried to reach out, and even asked his mom to intervene. But she just said he's deeply hurt and needs time. But this isn't just about him being hurt anymore, is it? No one threatens divorce over a few words, unless there's something else going on. At first, I tried to ignore it. But it's been eating at me. What if this whole situation is just an excuse? What if he's been talking to someone else and is using this fight as a way to walk away guilt-free? It sounds crazy. But the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. So, I did something I'm not proud of. I went through his emails and his social media accounts. He's terrible with passwords, so I guessed them pretty easily. I didn't find anything explicit. But there were a few old messages to a female coworker from months ago. They weren't inappropriate. But they were friendly. Too friendly, maybe. It makes me wonder. Has he been emotionally checked out for a while? And I just didn't see it. Could he be using this fight to justify leaving me? I also found an email draft addressed to his lawyer. But it was empty, just the recipient's name. It made my stomach drop. He hasn't even spoken to me about divorce. Yet he's apparently serious enough to contact someone about it. I feel like I'm losing my mind trying to figure out what's really going on. At this point, I don't know how to fix things. I've tried to reach out again. But now he's blocked me on almost everything except email. I don't understand how he can treat me like this after 6 years of marriage. It feels so cold and calculated, like he's already decided to throw us away, without even giving me a chance to make things right. A lot of you were pretty harsh in the comments on my original post, saying I was in the wrong, and that I needed to own up to what I did. I get it, maybe I shouldn't have said those things to my friends. But does that really justify him turning his back on me completely? He's the one shutting me out, refusing to talk, and threatening divorce. How am I supposed to fix something if he won't even let me try? If anyone has advice on how to get through to him or stop this from going further, I'm all ears. I still love my husband. And I don't want this to be the end of our marriage. But right now I feel like I'm fighting against a wall. And it's killing me. Update: Hi Reddit. I wasn't sure if I'd ever post again. I feel like I need to share where things stand now, not for advice but maybe just to get it off my chest. It's over. Mike is serious about the divorce. He hasn't said it directly to me, but I got the papers yesterday. I sat there holding the envelope, hoping it was something else, a letter, a message, even an explanation. But no, it was exactly what I feared. He's made up his mind. And there's no coming back from this. He's even outlined terms for splitting assets. And it's shockingly fair. He's not being vindictive or trying to hurt me. That's what makes it worse. He's calm, detached, and just done. The person who used to love me more than anything doesn't even want to look at me now. At first, I convinced myself this was just a phase, that he'd come back once he cooled off. Then I started spiraling into these paranoid theories, thinking maybe he was seeing someone else, or that there was something bigger at play. But none of that was true. I've had to sit with the reality that this is 100% on me. He didn't leave because he found someone new. He left because of what I said, what I did. I broke the trust between us. I humiliated him in the most personal way possible, sharing private details of our life with people who had no business knowing. I reduced him to some kind of punchline to make myself feel better in front of my friends. And he heard every word. I can't even imagine how that must have felt for him. Speaking of my friends, the ones I thought would stand by me, they've pretty much moved on. The few who reached out only wanted to know how things were going with the divorce, like it's some juicy drama for them to gossip about. One of them even said, "Well, you kind of brought this on yourself," and I haven't heard from her since. The worst part is that she's right. I did bring this on myself. I keep replaying that night in my head. I thought I was just venting, just joking. But I see it so differently now. I called him boring, unexciting, and even dragged up comparisons to my ex like it was no big deal. I insulted his parents, people who've only ever tried to help us, because I wanted to make my friends laugh. I didn't care how those words might hurt him because in my head he wasn't supposed to hear them. But does it matter if he wasn't supposed to hear? It was cruel either way. And now I've lost him. I've lost my marriage. I've lost the future we were supposed to have together. I see that now. I should have seen it sooner. But it's too late. Mike is gone, and even if I begged him to stay, I don't think he'd believe me. Why should he? I've done nothing to show I can change, and honestly I don't think I deserve him back. To anyone reading this, I don't know if there's a lesson here or not. Maybe just don't take the people you love for granted. Don't say things you can't take back. And don't wait until it's too late to figure out what really matters. I'm not sure what comes next for me, but it's not him. He's gone for good and it's all my fault. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button and share it with your friends.